Welcome back, Richard. It's good to see you again.
Good morning again. How are you?
I am doing well, and I'm excited to continue this conversation on raising kids in the 21st century. As
Mm.
we're, last podcast we talked about the recent Surgeon General's warning about parenting, and we talked a little bit about that uh, article in Psychology Today about some of the challenges with parenting um, and all. But today we are going to add in our perspectives on because we would add a few more things to what Dr. Pruitt mentioned.
Yeah, because what Pruitt said in his article was, and he said that he's concerned, and he is a child development specialist in the child development program at Yale. So he's a reliable source. I mentioned that because he's a reliable source. And what he said was that screen time of any type from birth to four or five, robs children of the opportunity to learn social skills. He's talking about social skills,
Mhm.
about how to interact with others, what effect your behavior has on other people, um, and what happens when you are dealing with another live person, whether you're an adult or a child, but particularly for young children. They learn facial expression and tone of voice and the other emotional cues. They learn that by interacting with other people,
Mhm.
particularly with other parents, with other adults, because you're constantly getting feedback from the other person, and that feedback is what you use to learn how to act in the world,
Right.
right? And so, if you rob children of that responsibility during these years of rapid brain growth, you take away the opportunity that they will never have again. They're not going to learn this when they're 10. You learn this, you have to learn these things from birth to five, right?
Right.
And
Absolutely.
so
And it's during that period, and as you said, it's considered a critical period because if you don't develop it during that time, the likelihood or the probability of you developing it any other time in life is extremely small, if not absent completely.
that's
So
right. It's
yeah.
mhm.
So it's really important that we look at that period of time and we examine, what's happening. And when children at that age are spending so much time in front of a screen and
Right.
not interacting with others directly, they're going to miss the opportunity to develop a lot of the social skills and a lot of the social understandings that we need them to understand.
That's right. And so you're raising your children at this particular time, but it doesn't absolve you, it doesn't excuse you from providing your children with the opportunity they need. You have to remember your obligation as a parent. We keep talking about parental obligation. Your obligation as a parent is to provide your children with opportunities, not only to learn to read and write, not only to learn how to speak, but also to learn social cues, to
Right.
know where the limits are, to know what they can and can't do. And that requires that you be present and that you be interacting with your children. You can't turn you can't turn child rearing over to, if you turn it over to a nanny, if you're fortunate enough to have the money that you can turn your child rearing over to a nanny, well, then they're going to learn what the nanny teaches them. And if the nanny is really good, things will work out okay. If you turn it over to a screen, you're robbing your children of the opportunity. And
Right.
and and so you ask, well, how much is too much? I'm not sure, but I know that the more personal interaction you have, person to person interaction you have, the more likely it is that your child will develop the social skills that you want him or her to develop.
Right. Well, and the recent recommendations that came out were any screen time between 0 to 2 is not recommended. Like zero, they want you to have zero screen time from birth to two, and from 2 to 5,
Right.
it's like maybe an hour a day. with a parent or an adult sitting with them to interact with them while they're engaging with the screen. So it's like the recommendations are pretty slim.
Right.
Even with what the CDC and some others are recommending. So it's but I think that parents tend to use screens as a almost as a babysitter.
Mhm.
Again, we say that it's not really that much different. Every generation of parents experience their own stress for other reasons. But Richard, when we were growing up, how many times was it said that, well, parents are using the TV as a babysitter?
Yeah, right, right.
And so
Mhm.
now we're using our iPhones and tablets as babysitters.
Right,
So it's
right.
again this a similar problem. It's just a different device, and this device is portable, which makes it a little bit more pervasive because now when you're going through the grocery store, you can see, my goodness, I saw this kid had to be under the age of one, maybe um, 6 to 10 months old or so,
Mhm.
with holding with a phone propped up in front of him on the
He
on
was watching Miss Rachel.
something while the parent was walking to the grocery store. And it's like, man, so many opportunities to interact with your child. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's faster if the kid's entertained and you don't have to interact with them. Shopping can be much faster, but
You
I
know, I
don't.
told my daughter she has a 10-month, 9-month old, and the American Academy of Pediatrics has been very clear about this for a long, long time,
Yeah,
that from birth to two, there's really no reason for a child to be in front of a screen. It just doesn't make any sense. They're not really getting much from it.
right,
And we said, well, and that they poo-poo that. People say, oh, okay, yeah, right. The pediatricians know what they're talking about because they do this every day and they
right.
see the results. They see hundreds of kids per week, and it's a national organization. So we're talking about millions of children per year seen by these pediatricians. And these pediatricians are giving us valuable information that we
Mhm.
can't get anywhere else. I mean, they have a perspective that nobody else has. And if they say to me, I don't think I'd use a screen from birth to two, I'm going to listen to them because they know what they're talking about. They know more than I do about this.
Right.
Okay. So I'm okay with them giving me advice.
Yeah, absolutely.
So where we want to extend what Pruitt is saying about screen time and infants is we want to take each segment of this birth to four or birth to five age group and talk about what do children need if this is an important area of development, if this is really a critical period, what is it that children really need at this point?
Right.
And the first uh, time period that we want to talk about is infancy. And
Yeah.
infancy is essentially birth to 12 months. Okay. The first
Right.
12 months of life is an
Yeah.
infant. We
And
begin with you can't spoil an infant.
and I think that that's so important because we we um we've been talking about that for goodness more than a decade now because we talked about it in the first parenting book that we wrote
Mhm.
back in 2012, and that was about that parents fear, and again, if we look back at what was happening at the time and what continues to happen is, parents become terrified that they're going to spoil their baby.
Right.
If the baby starts crying and you pick the baby up as soon as he starts crying, you're going to spoil the baby because it's going to learn that if it's
Mhm.
crying that you're going to pick up. Now, does it develop that understanding of cause and effect? When I cry,
Mhm.
somebody picks me up? Absolutely. Do you want the baby to know that when it cries that you're going to pick it up? Absolutely.
Right.
That's part of attachment. You want the baby needs to know that when it's in distress of any kind, when
Mhm.
it's in distress, you're going to be there to take care of it. That's how a healthy attachment is developed.
Right.
People fear that's going to spoil the child, that the child is then going to become manipulative, that the child is going to then cry for no reason.
Mhm.
Birth to 12 months or so, they don't have the cognitive awareness and understanding to become manipulative. Now, over the age
Right.
of one, yes, that can happen over the age of one. They can start figuring things out and
Right.
see the differences between mom and dad, and they'll understand some of those things beginning, after that first year of life. But we're talking about birth to 12 months, birth to 1 year. during this time frame, the vast majority of kids are not going to have the ability to develop the skills to be spoiled.
That's that's right.
Not
If
going to
they're
happen.
crying, they need something. They
Right.
might be cold, they might be hot, they might be tired, they might be hungry.
They
They
might
may
just
just
want
need to be
attention.
held. Huh?
Right. They might just want attention. They might just want you to hold them.
They might just need to be held. They don't know why. They might just need to have the comfort and the heartbeat and the warmth and the smell of their primary caregiver. Is that a bad thing? I,
Right.
if I could raise my kids again, I would want them to want that from me. Okay,
Right.
I can give that to them. So, if you're dealing with an infant, birth to 12 months, they're crying for a reason, and it's up to you to provide the comfort that they're seeking. Okay.
Absolutely.
It's also a time of human interaction. They're not going to learn how to talk, how to understand language, and they're not going to develop inner language. They learn, we could do a whole talk on developing inner language.
Yeah.
Kids learn how to control their behavior by using their parents' language. Their parents say, no, 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 you can't do that. And you'll hear a baby say, no, 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 you can't do that. That they vocalize that first, and then that becomes inner speech, and
Yeah.
then they
Over
say
time. Yeah.
it, they're thinking it. Okay, so but they can't learn. They're not going to learn that from a screen. They're going to only learn that from another person.
Right.
Emotional understanding, the same thing, and connecting and bonding with your infant all happens during this time,
Yeah.
and you're not going to have another opportunity to do this.
No,
You got to do this between the ages of birth and 12 months. Don't worry about spoiling the infant. You're not going to spoil the infant. You're
right.
providing care.
Right.
However, as you just said, after this, you can spoil a kid.
Right. And so after 12 months, so from about 1 year to up to maybe about 3 years of age,
About
before up
three.
to about the
Mhm.
time that they're starting
Right.
preschool.
Right.
Now you're talking about toddlerhood. Absolutely. Toddlers can be spoiled, right?
Right. Right.
So
Oh, yes,
I
they
think,
can. They get it.
and
Mhm.
Richard, I think that in this, I think about the things that we talked about with parenting. And maybe the ultimate message that we have to send to people is that your parenting has to change as your child changes.
Oh my
Your
God. Thank
parenting
you.
approach has to evolve over
Right.
time. Birth to
Mhm.
12, you're not going to spoil that child. And so you need to be on top of it, helping the child, making the child know that they're safe and secure so that a healthy attachment forms. After 12 months or so, now you start to pull apart a little bit. You start to separate just a little bit. Not completely. You're not talking about a middle schooler here. You're talking about an 18-month-old, right? So the child still needs to know who's in charge. So if
Mhm.
they start crying because they want something, now's the time when you say, no, we're not going to have that. You start setting a timeout, you start doing these different things to start creating some limitations and some boundaries with
Mhm.
what is acceptable and what is not acceptable behaviors.
Right.
Means no. There's a bedtime, there's a dinner time. There are these set routines that we have to get in. And all of this needs to start working from about 12 months, about 1 year to about 3 years of age.
You have to be a full-time parent when you have a toddler. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I can't change that.
right.
You children after age one, from their first birthday on, children need to know who's in charge, and they need to know that it's not them. They need to know that the big person in the room is the decision maker.
Right.
That when you say no, it's no. When there's going to be a bedtime, there has to be a bedtime. I mean, I'm sorry. There will be a bedtime. You will brush your teeth. You will whatever. You have to impose these things. They can't be making these decisions. Is it difficult? Is it easy to do this? Absolutely not. But it's what you're going to have to do. And it's never going to be easier than it is right now. As difficult as it seems with a 2-year old, I mean, especially a recalcitrant, angry, fighting 2-year old, the terrible twos. There's a reason why they're called the terrible twos and terrible threes. But it's
Right.
never going to be easier than it is now. If you don't do this when they're 2 or 3, infinitely more difficult when they're 5 and 6. All
Right.
right. Because they're smarter and they know more and they're better at it. So this is the time that you establish your routines. This is the time that you establish who's in charge. This is a time when you establish I want your Switch. I want your game. I want your Game Boy. Turn off the Game Boy and give it to me. And that happens with that verbal request. That child turns off the machine and gives it to you. This is the time to establish that. Okay.
And when we think about, you know, at any point in development, you want to think about what is the ultimate goal. And
Right.
at this point in development, what our ultimate goal is we need to have a child that by the age of 5 is ready to walk into a kindergarten classroom,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
What does it mean for a kid to successfully walk into a kindergarten classroom?
Right.
Most importantly, besides walking and talking and some of those kind of things, maybe toilet training and all that kind of stuff, besides those fundamentals, the
Mhm.
main thing we need a kid at 5 to be able to do is to understand that how to take direction and that the reality that your behavior affects other people and they are socialized. They
Mhm.
have to have this socialization to make them prepared to be successful at school. The
Right.
most difficult kindergartners, the most difficult
Mhm.
kids that we work with, school age kids
Right.
that we work with, are kids who are not socialized.
That's
These
right.
who
Mhm.
don't understand that the teacher is going to tell you, ask you to do something that you don't want to do.
Mhm.
You know what? I changed it to ask you to do something you don't want to do, but I need to change that back to the teacher is going to tell you to do something that you don't want to do, but you still have to do it.
You have to do it. Right.
You
Right.
have to. And kids, this starts at 12 months. This starts when your kid is just entering into toddlerhood.
That's right.
That's when they start to experience that. And if you deprive your kid of that,
Mhm.
you are setting them up for a lot of difficulty later in life.
That's
And
right.
later in life, I'm talking about in 3 years when they go to college, in 3 years when they go to elementary school, in
Right.
kindergarten.
That's right.
You're setting
Yeah,
them
you
up for failure.
that's right. If they don't realize that they must comply, that they don't have a choice, when you're asked to do something, you do it. When you're told that it's time to clean up your desk or it's time to put things away, they have to put things away. And it's your responsibility as a parent to teach the child that important lesson. Because if you don't, and your child starts having a temper tantrum when the teacher says, put your stuff away, your child's going to start having problems in school that you're
Right.
not going to want to deal with.
Now, I
Okay.
can I can hear parents saying, "Well, I don't want my kid to just be blindly compliant because what if somebody tells them to do something that they shouldn't be doing and everything?"
Completely different. Right.
That's a different story. And look, the reality of that is I think that so often we set the stage for those kind of things as though that is a common thing to happen.
Hmm.
Most teachers, the vast majority of teachers, are doing exactly what they need to do. That's exactly what's healthy for your kid. That is exactly what your kid needs to hear, do,
That's right. Right.
um, and your kid needs to do those things that the teacher is asking them to do. Are there
Hmm.
times when, there are these bad actors who go in and do things that and make demands and things that they should be doing? Absolutely. But the likelihood, the probability of that happening is so small that we need to not focus on that, especially at this stage of development.
Right.
Later, early elementary school, yes, we'll be dealing with that because at that point, a kid is starting to have the ability to hold two truths in their mind at the same time. They're starting
Hmm.
to have that ability that, most adults are good, but some adults may want to do bad things. They can start to understand that. But at this stage, from in toddlerhood, kids, we have stranger danger. We have those things that we should have to let kids know that there's
Hmm.
to be safe. But we need to raise our kids to understand that a person in a position such as a teacher, such as a parent, such as a supervising adult, that they are going to make rules that you have to follow.
That's right. And you're going to, if you're going to function in the world,
Hmm.
if you want to be a hermit and you want to live out by yourself somewhere in the middle of a woods, none of this matters. Okay. But if you're going to live in society, you're going to be better off if you're compliant, if you're obedient, if you are cooperative.
Hmm.
Um, if your child I want
Well,
to be very careful here. If you want your child to be different, if you want your child to be the exception, if you want your child to make all of his or her decisions, that child is going to become an outlier and they're not going to fit in and they are going to become a pariah and they're going to get criticized and they're going to be made fun of because they're not part of the group. They don't function as part of a group. They want to function in their own little world. There's no value in that if you're going to school. Okay.
well, Richard, and what we often do, we look at, we look at patterns of behavior. And
Hmm.
here's where this pattern of behavior leads. When a kid isn't socialized, when a kid doesn't learn some of these basic fundamentals, starting at this age.
Hmm.
My wife is a middle school teacher, and they have a new administrator, and so she was talking to her one of her classes the other day, and she said, "Okay, look, we have a new administrator, and so there's some new rules. The new rule is, and it it's a completely different story that we could talk about for like 10 podcasts on why we would even have to make this rule. But the new rule is if you cuss out a teacher, these are middle schoolers.
If you cuss out a teacher,
If you curse out a teacher, you're going to
okay.
be suspended for 3 days.
Hmm.
Again, why we have to even identify that because that's such a problem, that's another story. But she says if you curse out a teacher, you're going to be suspended for 3 days. Immediately, one of the students says, "Well, that's not fair. Why would that not, what? Like where in life, where in the world that you live in, would it be okay for you as a 11-year-old to curse out a teacher? How is that? But that is all rooted way back to that early socialization to understand that there are people who have positions of authority in your life that you have to comply with.
That's right.
And you may not like what they're asking you to do because you don't like doing that kind of an assignment, or you don't like doing that kind of work, or you're not interested in this kind of information. That's fine. You don't have to like it, but you have to comply. If you choose not to comply, there will be consequences to it.
Mhm.
That is that socialization that, again, roots all the way back to this toddlerhood stuff that we're talking about right now.
There will be consequences. You know,
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I didn't make these rules. I'm not, but this is how the world works.
right,
And you're either going to function in that world or you're going to become an outlier.
right,
You know, you don't raise the other thing you mentioned about dangerous places can be dangerous, or um, you don't raise your children based on the rare exception. You base
right,
them on what happens routinely day after day. Could your child be kidnapped? Absolutely. But most children don't get kidnapped. Okay. So, yeah, you have to keep them safe, but you don't put them in a plastic bubble
right,
because if you put them in a plastic bubble, you're robbing them of the opportunity to develop a normal life.
right,
So,
right.
don't raise your children based on the exceptions, base them on what typically happens to most of us most of the time.
Yeah.
So
Now,
that's the early childhood period. But then
right,
you get into this preschool period. It's kind of around age 3.
right.
Okay.
Yeah. So between 3 and the start of kindergarten,
Right.
now the kids are getting out, and they're out of the house because if you're
Right.
in preschool, they're out of the house. And so now they're being influenced by, this is what all that preparation was for toddlerhood.
Right.
Now the kids are out of the house and they're taking direction and learning from someone else that's not you.
Right. Right.
Um, and they have to be prepared for that. That all of that started in toddlerhood.
Hmm.
But you have to, as parents, realize that it's not just about you anymore. Now it's about how your kid is interacting and engaging with other people. And this is a critical thing that they have to develop. If they haven't gained the skills of interacting face to face with you during
Hmm.
that toddlerhood period, they're going to have a really difficult time doing that with a teacher.
Right.
So during this time, now they're building the skills of doing that with people outside of the family.
Right. You know, it just when you said it's not about you, it just struck me like, and also the child has to learn that
Yeah,
it's not just about him or her.
right,
The world now, the world might have revolved around you alone. You know, your parents, especially if you're a first child or an only child, Yeah, the world seemed to revolve around you, your needs and your wants, and we took very good care of you and we spoiled you and we made you feel independent and powerful. But as soon as you enter a preschool or VPK or kindergarten, as soon as you enter a group of others, this isn't about you anymore.
Right.
Okay, so you're going to have to get over yourself, and you're going to have to do that quickly. But that should have been done
Hmm.
before you entered this social group. You
Right.
you should know that I'm important, but I'm not the only important one here.
Absolutely. And so, because again, the ultimate goal is that by the time that they turn 5 and they enter kindergarten, that they're not having temper tantrums anymore.
Right.
They know how to clean up their own messes. They
Right.
can play well with other kids. They can handle
Mhm.
it. If somebody else is playing with something that they want to play with, they know how to take turns. These are the skills, but all of that is all of those are social skills. All
Right.
of those are rooted in how we interact and engage with other people in our world.
That's right. Are they?
Only learn that through experience. You don't learn that from watching a screen.
That's right. This has all of these things that we're talking about can only occur in a person-to-person interaction. Do you want to use, do you know Miss Rachel, Bernie? Have you been introduced to, you
Mhm.
know who I'm talking about, that
Yeah.
woman who does that thing. Very entertaining. Kids love it. They love Barney, they love the Grouch, whatever, the Grouch on Sesame Street. There's always these characters that kids sort of gravitate to. No harm in that, okay? As a form of entertainment for kids older than 3, 2.5, 3, you don't need it before that. If you want to introduce it, you want your kid to watch for, okay, no harm done if they do it for 10 or 15 minutes, even if they do it every day for 10 or 15 minutes. But you're only going to accomplish these things by person-to-person interaction.
Right. And
Okay?
again, what's recommended is if a kid during these ages are looking at screens, that parents are there, either they're with them or
Right,
parents are then talking to them and interacting with them about it.
right.
Oh, what did
Mhm,
Miss Rachel do today? Oh, what do you think
mhm,
she's going to do next? What do you think is going to happen with this or with that? And, again, you're building in those person-to-person social skills into the things that they're seeing on the screen.
You mentioned TV earlier, TV as babysitter, and that was exactly what we recommended to parents back in the 70s and 80s. Watch TV with your kids. You
Right.
don't have to unplug the TV, but watch programs with your kids. Why? Because you have person-to-person interaction. You're not relying totally. Remember that character from Willy Wonka,
Yeah.
who watched TV?
Yeah. Johnny TV. Yeah.
Right, 2010. That's what I'm thinking about as we're talking about this. That
Mhm.
you cannot just rely on these devices. Okay.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're going to end up with Johnny TV.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing I'd like for parents to tell their children is um, your teacher knows more than you do.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know more than you do, and your teacher knows more than you do. So get a hold, just calm down, because these adults know more than you do. And if they're concerned, I'm concerned.
Absolutely. So just some wrapping up points to make.
Hmm.
Again, all of these social skills kids need to learn and develop, but they're not going to do that with screens. They're going to do that only through person-to-person interactions and engaging with people face to face. Um,
Hmm.
you know, for some of the reasons you just mentioned, the TV thing again, for so many reasons, yeah, today is difficult. And there's some new challenges that parents today are dealing with that we didn't deal with in generations past.
Right,
But every generation has had stressors. Every generation has had something new that they've had to figure out how to deal with, that they've had to figure. And just about the time that we feel like we have figured it out, there's going to be something new.
right,
It's going to be something new that we're going to have to figure out how to deal with. And so
right,
all of this is ever evolving, and it
right,
evolves fast.
right,
But we just have to evolve with it because our fundamental goal and purpose remains the same, to raise decent human beings.
right. And
Um,
this time period from birth to 5 is so absolutely critical for so many reasons. We always think about language development or physical development, but geez, don't forget about social development.
right.
Being left alone, and what I'm going to tell my children
Mhm.
as I watch them raise their children is being left alone, not being bothered by your children,
Mhm.
is not a good trade for what it's going to cost your children.
Right.
Okay. You there is nothing that you're doing that's so important that you have to neglect your children to do it. When I hear that fathers are coming home and playing video games after work, and I think, what, where are the children?
Right.
If you're taking an hour or two to play video games, what are the children doing?
Right.
Who's my, there's nothing, there is nothing in your life that's so important that you need to be left alone because the cost to your children is simply going to be too high.
Absolutely.
And yet you have the obligation. That's why we say, is it different? Yeah, but parents need to parent. They need to, and no matter what else is going on in the world, you still have these obligations, and they're especially critical in this birth to five crowd.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So definitely encourage you guys to focus on that. For those of you who have kids within that age range, those of you who have kids outside of that age range, good luck. No.
Different, different set of
Different
challenges.
set of challenges, absolutely. So and we'll keep hammering away at some of this and offering some things to think about at least. But
Right.
till next time, stay happy, stay healthy, and forget to be afraid.